Welcome back, fifth graders. My name is Mrs. Destry, and I am reading Sharon Creech's Walk Two Moons. We're reading a couple chapters every video, so if you've missed the first chapters, go ahead and go back and watch them so that you're ready for Chapter 8. Chapter 8, The Lunatic. Once we were well on the road out of Illinois, Graham said, "Go on with Peebee. What happened next?" "Do you want to hear about the lunatic?" "Goodness," Graham said, "as long as it's not too bloody. That Peebee is just like Gloria, I swear. A lunatic, imagine." Graham said, "Did Gloria really have a hankering for me?" "Maybe she did, maybe she didn't," Graham said. "Well, gall dang, I was only asking." "Seems to me," Graham said, "you've got enough to worry about concentrating on these roads without worrying about Gloria." Graham winked at me in the rear view mirror. "I think our gooseberry is jealous," he said. "I am not," Graham said. "Tell me about Peebee, Chickabiddy." I didn't want Graham and Gramps to get into a fight over Gloria, so was happy to continue telling Phoebe's story. I was at Phoebe's one Saturday morning when Mary Lou Finney called and invited us over to her house. Phoebe's parents were out, and Phoebe went all around the house checking to make sure that the doors and the windows were locked. Her mother had already done this, but she made Phoebe promise to do it as well, just in case, Mrs. Winterbottom had said. I was not sure just in case of what. Maybe in case someone had snuck in and opened all the windows and doors in the 15 minutes between the time she left and the time that we did. "You can never be too careful," Mrs. Winterbottom said. The doorbell rang. Phoebe and I looked out of the window. Standing on the porch was a young man who looked about 17 or 18, although I'm not as good at guessing people's ages as blind Mrs. Partridge's. The young man was wearing a black t-shirt and blue jeans, and his hands were stuffed into his pockets. He seemed nervous. "My mother hates it when strangers come to the door," Phoebe said. "She's convinced that any day one of them will burst into the house with a gun and turn out to be an escaped lunatic." "Oh, honestly, Phoebe," I said, "do you want me to answer the door?" Phoebe took a deep breath. "We'll do it together." She opened the door and said hello in a cool voice. "Is this 49 Gray Street?" the young man said. "Yes," Phoebe said. "So the Winterbottoms live here?" After Phoebe admitted that yes, it was the Winterbottom residence, he said, "Excuse me a moment, please," and she closed the door. "Sal, do you detect any signs of lunacy? There doesn't appear to be any place he could be hiding a gun. His jeans are really tight. Maybe he has a knife tucked into his socks." Phoebe could be really dramatic. "He isn't wearing any socks," I said. Phoebe opened the door. The young man said, "I want to see Mrs. Winterbottom. Is she here or what?" "Yes," Phoebe lied. The young man looked up and down the street. His hair was curly and mussed, and there were bright pink circles on his cheeks. He wouldn't look us straight in the eye, but instead kept glancing to the left and right. "I would like to talk to her." "She can't come to the door right now," Phoebe said. I thought he might actually cry when Phoebe said that. He chewed on his lip and blinked 3 or 4 times quickly. "I'll wait," he said. "Just a minute," Phoebe said, closing the door. She pretended to look for her mother. "Mom," she called. "Yoo-hoo!" She went upstairs, thumping loudly on the steps. "Mother!" Phoebe and I returned to the door. He was still standing there with his hands in his pockets, staring mournfully at Phoebe's house. "That's strange," Phoebe said. "I thought she was here, but she must have gone out. There are a whole lot of other people here, though," she added quickly. "Scads and scads of people, but no Mrs. Winterbottom." "Is Mrs. Winterbottom your mother?" he asked. "Yes," Phoebe said. "Would you like to leave a message?" The little pink circles on his cheeks became even pinker. "No," he said. "No, I don't think so. No." He looked up and down the street and then up at the number above the door. "What's your name?" "Phoebe." He repeated her name. "Phoebe Winterbottom." Thought he was going to make a joke about her name, but he didn't. He glanced at me. "Are you a Winterbottom too?" he asked. "No," I said. "I'm a visitor." And then he left. He just turned around, walked slowly down the porch steps, on down to the street. We waited until he had turned the corner before we left. We ran all the way to Mary Lou's. Phoebe was certain that the young man was going to ambush us. Honestly, like I said, she had a vivid imagination. Chapter 9, The Message. Let's double check how long Chapter 9 is. Oh, we're good. Okay. Chapter 9, The Message. On the way to Mary Lou's, Phoebe said, "Mary Lou's family is not nearly as civilized as ours." In what way? I asked. Oh, you'll see, Phoebe said. Mary Lou Finney and Ben Finney were both in our class at school. At first I thought they were sister and brother, but Phoebe told me that they were actually cousins and that Ben was living with Mary Lou's family temporarily. Apparently, there was always at least one stray relative living at the Finneys temporarily. It was complete pandemonium at the Finneys. Mary Lou had an older sister and 3 brothers. In addition, there were her parents and Ben. There were footballs and basketballs lying all over the place and boys sliding down the banister and leaping over tables and talking with their mouths full and interrupting everyone with endless questions. Phoebe took one look around and whispered to me, "Mary Lou's parents do not seem to have much control over things." Phoebe could sound a little bit prissy sometimes. Mr. Finney was lying in the bathtub with all his clothes on, reading a book. From Mary Lou's bedroom window, I saw Mrs. Finney lying on top of the garage with a pillow under her head. "What's she doing?" I asked. Mary Lou peering out of the window. "King of Kings, she's taking a nap." When Mr. Finney got out of the bathtub, he went out into the backyard and tossed a football around with Dennis and Dougie, 2 of Mary Lou's brothers. Mr. Finney shouted, "Over here and that away and way to go." The previous weekend, we had a school sports day. Parents were watching their children show off, and there were even some events for the parents too, such as the 3-legged race and pass the grapefruit. My father couldn't come, but Mary Lou's parents were there, and so were Phoebe's. Phoebe had said, "The games are a little childish sometimes, which is why my parents don't usually participate." Her parents stood on the sidelines while Mr. and Mrs. Finney ran around shouting, "Over there, way to go!" In the 3-legged race, the Finneys kept falling over. Phoebe said, "I wonder if Mary Lou is embarrassed because of the way her parents are acting." I didn't think it was embarrassing. I thought it was nice, but I didn't say to Phoebe. I think that deep down, Phoebe thought it was nice too, and she wished her own parents would act more like the Finneys. She couldn't admit this, though, and in a way I like this about Phoebe. She tried to defend her family. On the day that Phoebe and I met the potential lunatic and then went over to Mary Lou's, a couple other peculiar things happened. We were sitting on the floor of Mary Lou's room, and Phoebe was telling Mary Lou about the mysterious potential lunatic. Mary Lou's brother, Dennis, Doug, and Tommy kept dashing in and out of the room, leaping on the bed and squirting us with squirt guns. Mary Lou's cousin Ben was lying on her bed, staring at me with his black eyes. They looked like 2 sparkly black discs set into big round sockets. His dark eyelashes were long and feathery, casting shadows on his cheeks. "I like your hair," he said to me. "Can you sit on it?" "Yes, if I want." Ben picked up a piece of paper from Mary Lou's desk, lay back down on the bed, and drew a picture of a lizard-like creature with long black hair that, as it ran down the lizard's back and under its bottom, became a chair with legs. Underneath this, Ben had written, "Salamander sitting on her hair." "Very amusing," Phoebe said. She left the room, and Mary Lou followed her. I turned around to hand the drawing back to Ben just as he leaned forward and mashed his lips into my collarbone. His lips rested there for a moment. My nose was pressed into his hair, which smelled like grapefruit. Then he rolled off the bed, grabbing the drawing, and dashed out of the room. Did he actually kiss my collarbone? And if he did, why did he do that? Was the kiss supposed to land somewhere else, like my mouth, for example? That was a chilling thought. Had I imagined it? Maybe he merely brushed against me when he was rolling off the bed. On the way home from Mary Lou's that day, Phoebe said, "Wasn't it, loud in there?" "I didn't mind," I said. I was thinking of something my father once said to my mother. "We'll fill up this house with children. We'll fill it right up to the brim." But they hadn't filled it up. It was just me and them, and then it was just me and my father. When we got back to Phoebe's house, her mother was lying on the couch, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Is something wrong?" Phoebe asked. "Oh no," Mrs. Winterbottom said. "Nothing's wrong." Then Phoebe told her mother about the potential lunatic who had come into the house earlier. This news upset Mrs. Winterbottom. She wanted to know exactly what he had said and what Phoebe had said and what he looked like and how he acted and how Phoebe acted, on and on. At last, Mrs. Winterbottom said, "I think we'd better not mention this to your father." She reached forward as if to hug Phoebe, but Phoebe pulled away. Later, Phoebe said, "That's odd. Usually my mother tells my father absolutely everything." "Maybe she's just trying to save you from getting into trouble for talking to a stranger?" "I still didn't like keeping secrets from him," Phoebe said. We walked out onto her porch, and there, lying on top of the step, was a white envelope. There was no name or anything on the outside. I thought it was one of those advertisements for painting your house or cleaning your carpets or something. Phoebe opened it. "Gosh," she said. Inside was a small piece of blue paper, and on it was printed this message: "Don't judge a man until you've walked 2 moons in his moccasins." "What an odd thing," Phoebe said. When Phoebe showed the message to her mother, Mrs. Winterbottom clutched at her collar. "Who can it be for?" Mrs. Winterbottom asked. Mr. Winterbottom came in the back door carrying his golf clubs. "Look, George," Mrs. Winterbottom said. "Who could this be for?" "I couldn't say, really," Mr. Winterbottom said. "But George, why would someone send us this message?" "I couldn't say, Norma. Maybe it isn't for us." "Not for us," Mrs. Winterbottom said, "but it was on our steps." "Really, Norma, it could be for anyone. Maybe it's for Prudence or for Phoebe." "Phoebe?" Mrs. Winterbottom asked. "Is it for you?" "For me," Phoebe said. "I don't think so." "Well, who is it for?" Mrs. Winterbottom said. She was awfully worried. I believe she thought it came from a potential lunatic. All right, I'm going to stop right there before chapter 10. I hope you're enjoying this as much as I am. This is my favorite book after all, and I love reading it to you. I hope you come back for the next installment of Walk 2 Moons. Bye.